Jake Morrison's hands were raw from scrubbing floors when he heard the noise. It was almost 2 in the morning on Nexus Station, and the maintenance tunnels were supposed to be empty. But there it was again, a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across metal. He grabbed his mop tighter and moved toward the noise. Working night shift as a janitor wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep a roof over his 7-year-old daughter Lily's head. Barely. After his wife died 3 years ago, every credit counted. The lower maintenance level smelled like recycled air and machine oil. Jake rounded the corner near the waste processors and stopped dead. An alien was collapsed on the floor, one clawed hand reaching toward a discarded food wrapper. The creature was old, that much was obvious. Its reptilian scales were dull gray instead of the vibrant colors Jake had seen on other members of its species. Deep cracks ran along its arms and neck, signs Jake recognized from the station medical posters. Severe malnutrition. "Hey," Jake said softly, approaching slowly. "You okay?" The alien's head turned. Its eyes were cloudy but aware. It tried to speak, but only a raspy wheeze came out. Jake knelt down, ignoring the puddle of coolant soaking into his pants. Up close, he could see the alien was trembling, its body eating itself from the inside out. Jake knew what he should do. Call security. Report the situation. Let the professionals handle it. But he also knew what happened to indigent aliens on Nexus Station. They got processed, documented, and shipped back to wherever they came from. If they survived the journey. Instead, Jake pulled his lunch bag from his belt. Inside was a sandwich, synthetic turkey on real bread, a luxury he'd saved up for because Lily had been craving it. He planned to split it with her tomorrow during his break between shifts. "Here," Jake said, unwrapping it. "You need this more than I do." The alien stared at the sandwich, then at Jake. Its mouth opened slowly, revealing rows of small teeth. Jake broke off a piece and held it out. The alien took it with shaking claws and ate slowly, carefully, like someone who hadn't had food in a very long time. They sat together in silence while the alien finished half the sandwich. Jake insisted it eat the rest, even though his own stomach was growling. When the alien finally spoke, its voice was barely a whisper. "Veth," it said, touching its chest. "My name." "Veth." "Jake," he replied, doing the same gesture. "Nice to meet you, Veth." Veth tried to stand but couldn't. His legs buckled, and Jake caught him before he hit the ground. The alien weighed less than he should have, all bone and loose skin under those dull scales. Jake looked around the empty corridor. Station security wouldn't patrol down here for another 3 hours. "All right, Veth," Jake said. "Let's get you somewhere warmer." There was a storage room nearby where Jake kept his cleaning supplies. It wasn't much, but it had a space heater and some old maintenance blankets. Jake helped Veth inside and made a makeshift bed. The alien collapsed onto it with what sounded like a sigh of relief. "You rest," Jake said. "I'll bring you water." He spent the next hour finishing his route while his mind raced. What was he doing? He could lose his job over this. Worse, if security found out, they might file charges. Harboring an undocumented alien was serious business on Nexus Station. But when Jake returned with a bottle of water and some protein bars from the vending machine, there went tomorrow's lunch money. Veth looked at him with such gratitude that he knew he couldn't walk away. "Thank you," Veth whispered in heavily accented standard. "Thank you, Jake Morrison." "Don't mention it," Jake said, sitting down against the wall. "Seriously. Don't mention it to anyone." What Jake didn't know was that 17 cameras covered that section of maintenance tunnel. What he couldn't see were the encrypted data streams flowing from Nexus Station to a flagship 3 systems away. And what he couldn't possibly imagine was that someone very powerful, very far away, was watching the footage of a human janitor sharing his last meal with a stranger. The Empress of the Valdrine Empire sat in her private quarters, staring at the holographic display. She'd been searching for her father for 6 months. 6 months of terror, of diplomatic nightmares, of sleepless nights wondering if he was alive or dead. And there he was. Reduced to begging for scraps in a maintenance tunnel, saved by a human janitor who looked like he couldn't afford to save himself. She watched Jake help her father to the storage room. Watched him give away his food, his time, his safety. Her hand hovered over the communication panel. One word and her fleet could be there in hours. But her father was alive. Weak, but alive. And he hadn't revealed himself, even though he clearly recognized the security cameras. He was testing something. Learning something. So she would watch. And wait. And see what kind of species humanity really was when they thought no one important was watching. Jake's alarm went off at 6 in the morning, and for once, he didn't hit snooze. He had 3 hours before Lily woke up for school, and he needed to get back to the station. His shift ended at 5, but Veth needed food. Real food, not just protein bars. He stopped at the market on the way, spending credits he'd been saving for Lily's school supplies. The vendor gave him a strange look when he bought foods that were safe for reptilian species, but Jake just smiled and said he was trying new things. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. When he reached the storage room, Veth was awake, sitting up against the wall. The alien looked better than yesterday, but not by much. Jake unpacked the food, nutrient paste, dried insects that cost a fortune, and a container of water mixed with electrolytes. "You came back," Veth said, his voice stronger now. "Course I did," Jake replied. "Can't let you starve down here." They fell into a routine after that. Every morning before going home, Jake brought food. Every evening before his shift, he checked on Veth. Slowly, color began returning to the alien's scales. The cracks started healing. Veth began moving around the storage room, doing small exercises to rebuild his strength. On the 5th day, Lily noticed something was wrong. "Dad, why are you eating cereal again?" she asked, staring at his bowl. Jake had been rotating between the cheapest meals for days now, cutting corners everywhere he could. "Just felt like it, kiddo," he said, forcing a smile. Lily wasn't fooled. She was only 7, but she was sharp as a tack, got that from her mother. "You always eat cereal when money's tight. Are we okay?" Jake's heart squeezed. "We're fine, Lily. I promise." But that night, when he got to the station, Lily's lunchbox was in his bag. Inside was a note in her wobbly handwriting, "For your friend. Love, Lily." She'd packed half her sandwich, an apple, and her favorite cookies. Jake stood in the maintenance tunnel and cried for the first time since his wife's funeral. "Your daughter," Veth said when Jake showed him the note. "She has a kind heart. Like her father." "She's everything to me," Jake said quietly. "After my wife died, Lily's the only thing that kept me going. Some days I feel like I'm failing her, you know? She deserves better than this station, better than me working my fingers to the bone just to keep us fed." Veth listened, his dark eyes reflecting the dim lights. "You are not failing her. You teach her the most important lesson, compassion. Wealth means nothing if the heart is poor." Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. Veth started helping. At first, it was small things, organizing Jake's supplies, sorting through spare parts. Then one night, Jake found him repairing a broken ventilation unit that maintenance had given up on months ago. "How did you do that?" Jake asked, staring at the now humming machine. Veth's expression was unreadable. "I've lived a long life. Fixed many things." Soon, Veth was joining Jake on his rounds. The old alien moved slowly but surely, his knowledge of station systems somehow surpassing even the head engineers. When Jake mentioned this, Veth just smiled and changed the subject. They talked during those long night shifts. Jake told stories about his wife, about the day Lily was born, about his dreams of getting off the station someday. Veth shared tales of his homeworld, vast crystal cities, purple skies, oceans that glowed at night. But he was always careful, Jake noticed. Never names. Never specific places. Like he was hiding something. On the 17th day, Jake brought a picture of Lily to show Veth. The alien studied it for a long time. "She has her mother's eyes," Veth said. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "Sometimes it hurts to look at her. But in a good way, you know? Like a reminder that something beautiful can still exist even after everything falls apart." Veth touched the photo gently with one claw. "You are a good father, Jake Morrison. Better than many I have known." What Jake didn't see was the way Veth's expression changed when he turned away. The old alien's eyes went distant, thoughtful. He was thinking of his own daughter, of the empire he'd left behind, of the test he was conducting. This human janitor, struggling to survive, had given everything to a stranger. No reward expected. No recognition needed. Just simple, profound kindness. Meanwhile, 3 systems away, the Empress watched the same scene on her displays. She saw her father holding the photo of the human child. Saw the expression on his face, the same look he'd had when she was young, before the politics and power changed everything. Her communication officer approached. "Your Majesty, the fleet is ready. We can extract the Emperor within hours." "No," she said quietly. "Not yet. He's learning something. So am I." Back on the station, Jake's supervisor stopped him in the hall. "Morrison, you've been using a lot of supplies lately. Everything okay?" Jake's blood ran cold. Yes, sir. Just being thorough. The supervisor stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Keep it up. Maintenance level hasn't looked this good in years. That was close. Too close. Jake knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Eventually, someone would ask the wrong questions. Eventually, he'd run out of credits, out of excuses, out of luck. But when he got to the storage room and saw Veth standing on his own, scales now gleaming with hints of deep blue and gold, Jake smiled. Whatever happened next, he'd done the right thing. His wife would have been proud. Lily would understand. Sometimes, Jake thought, doing the right thing was its own reward. He had no idea how wrong he was about that. He had no idea that his small kindnesses were about to ripple across the entire galaxy. The cameras watched. The Empress waited. And Veth, Emperor Vetheran of the Valdrine, smiled to himself in the darkness, thinking about a human janitor who had everything to lose and nothing to gain, yet gave anyway. Everything changed on a Tuesday. Jake was getting ready for work when Lily started coughing. Not the normal kind of cough kids get. This was deep, rattling, the kind that made his stomach drop. He pressed his hand to her forehead and felt the heat radiating off her skin. Dad, she whispered, I don't feel good. He called in sick to work, first time in 2 years, and carried her to the station medical center. The waiting room was packed with aliens of every species, all looking miserable. They waited for 3 hours before a nurse finally called Lily's name. The doctor was a centauri with too many eyes and not enough patience. She ran the scanner over Lily, frowned at the results, and ran it again. Bacterial infection in her lungs, the doctor said flatly. Needs immediate treatment or it'll spread. We can start her on antibiotics right now. Relief flooded through Jake. Thank God. Yes, please, start the treatment. The doctor tapped her tablet. That'll be 1,500 credits. Up front. Jake's relief turned to ice. 1,500? I don't have that kind of money. Can't we do a payment plan? Station policy. No payment, no treatment. The doctor's voice was cold, mechanical. There's a charity clinic on level 42, but the wait time is usually 3 to 4 weeks. 3 weeks? She needs help now. The doctor shrugged. Then you need 1,500 credits. Next patient, please. Jake wanted to scream. He wanted to grab that doctor and shake her until she understood that this was his daughter, his entire world, dying while they argued about money. Instead, he picked up Lily and left, her small body shaking with fever against his chest. He spent the rest of the day trying everything. He called every friend he had, all 3 of them. He applied for emergency loans and got rejected by automated systems that didn't care about sob stories. He even swallowed his pride and asked his supervisor for an advance. The answer was no across the board. By evening, Lily's fever had spiked to dangerous levels. Jake gave her the last of the fever reducers from their medicine cabinet and watched her sleep fitfully on their worn couch. His wife's ring sat on the table in front of him, white gold with a tiny diamond, the only valuable thing they'd ever owned. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it. The weight of memory. Their wedding day in that tiny chapel, her smile as he slipped it on her finger, the way she'd never taken it off until the day she died. This ring was all he had left of her. But Lily needed medicine more than he needed memories. Jake was reaching for his comm unit to call a pawn shop when someone knocked on his door. He opened it to find Veth standing there, looking stronger than ever but clearly worried. You did not come to the station, Veth said. I was concerned. Jake explained everything in a rush. About Lily, the money, the ring. Veth listened, his expression growing darker with each word. Show me the child, Veth said quietly. Jake led him to the couch. Veth knelt beside Lily and placed one clawed hand gently on her forehead. His eyes closed for a moment, then opened with what looked like pain. This is wrong, Veth said. A child suffers while those with power to help count their coins. This is very wrong. Yeah, well, that's life on the station, Jake said bitterly. Money talks, everyone else walks. Veth stood up slowly. He reached into the folds of his clothing and pulled out something Jake had never seen before, a medallion on a heavy chain, covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift in the light. Take this, Veth said, pressing it into Jake's hands. Sell it. Save your daughter. Jake stared at the medallion. It was beautiful, clearly old, but he had no idea what it was worth. Veth, I can't take this. This looks important. Nothing is more important than a father protecting his child. Veth's voice was firm. You gave me food when you had none to spare. You gave me safety when it put you at risk. You gave me dignity when I had nothing. Let me give you this. Please. Jake's hands trembled. I'll pay you back. I swear, I'll find a way. You already have, Veth said softly. More than you know. The next morning, Jake took the medallion to an antique dealer on level 20. The Vraxian behind the counter took one look at it and his 3 eyes went wide. Where did you get this? The dealer demanded. It's mine to sell, Jake said carefully. How much? The dealer examined it with special equipment, muttering to himself. Finally, he looked up. This is Valdrine Royal period work. Pre-expansion era. I can give you 8,000 credits. Jake nearly fell over. 8,000. And that's wholesale. At auction, this could go for triple. But I have the credits now, and I'm guessing you need money fast. Jake took the deal. He ran back to the medical center with the credits transferred to his account, paid for Lily's treatment, and watched with tears in his eyes as they hooked her up to the 4. The antibiotics started working within hours. By that evening, her fever had broken. He sat beside her bed, holding her small hand, thanking every god he could think of. Thanking Veth most of all. What Jake didn't know was that selling that medallion had triggered alarms across 3 systems. Valdrine Royal artifacts didn't just appear on random space stations. When they did, people noticed. Important people. Station security flagged the transaction. A report went up the chain of command. Within hours, officials in expensive suits were asking questions. And in her flagship, the Empress stood up from her throne. How long until we arrive? She asked her navigator. 16 hours at maximum speed, Your Majesty. She nodded slowly, still watching the security footage of Jake Morrison, who'd just sold priceless royal property to save his dying child. The same human who'd been feeding her father for weeks with money he didn't have. Prepare the royal guard, she said. And send a message to station command. Tell them to lock down all exits. No one leaves until I arrive. Her chief advisor looked nervous. Your Majesty, if we move openly, we could start a diplomatic incident. I don't care, she said coldly. My father has been testing humanity. Now I'm going to meet the human who passed. Back on the station, Jake returned to his apartment and found Veth waiting. The old alien looked at Lily sleeping peacefully and smiled. She will be well? Veth asked. Yeah, Jake said, his voice cracking. Thanks to you. I don't know how to repay. You don't, Veth interrupted gently. That is the point, Jake Morrison. You never asked how to repay me. You just helped. That is why what comes next will change everything. Jake didn't understand what that meant. He wouldn't understand until tomorrow, when his life would be turned completely upside down. But for tonight, he just sat with his daughter and his friend, grateful that kindness had somehow, impossibly, been enough. The cameras watched. The Empress traveled. And time was running out for secrets. Jake was mopping the corridors on level 12 when station security found him. 3 officers, armed and serious, appeared around the corner like they meant business. Jake Morrison, the lead officer asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. Jake's heart sank. This was it. Someone had figured out he'd been hiding Veth. He thought about Lily, still recovering at home with the neighbor watching her. What would happen to her if he got arrested? Yeah, that's me, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. You need to come with us. Administrator Davidson wants to see you immediately. They escorted him through the station, and Jake noticed people staring. Word traveled fast on Nexus Station, and by the time they reached the administrative level, everyone seemed to know something big was happening. Administrator Robert Davidson sat behind an expensive desk in an office that probably cost more than Jake would make in 10 years. The man was human, mid-50s, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Jake had seen him around the station but never spoken to him directly. People like Davidson didn't talk to people like Jake. Mr. Morrison, Davidson said, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit down. Jake sat, his hands gripping his knees. The security officers stood by the door, blocking any exit. I'm going to be direct with you, Davidson continued. We know you've been harboring an undocumented alien in storage room 47B. We also know you sold a valuable artifact yesterday, an artifact that, according to our experts, shouldn't exist on this station. Jake's mouth went dry. I can explain. I'm sure you can. But here's the thing, Mr. Morrison. What you've done is a serious crime. Harboring illegals, theft of station resources, possibly trafficking in stolen goods. You're looking at 5 years minimum in a detention facility. Your daughter would go into the system, of course. Foster care, probably shipped off station. The words hit Jake like physical blows. 5 years. Lily in foster care. Everything he'd worked for, gone. But, Davidson said, leaning back in his chair, I'm a reasonable man. I understand that sometimes people make mistakes. So I'm prepared to make this all go away. For a price. There it was. Jake had heard stories about Davidson, about how he squeezed money from anyone he could. How much? 50,000 credits. Jake actually laughed, a bitter sound. I don't have 50,000 credits. I don't have 5,000 credits. I'm a janitor. Then I suggest you find a way, Davidson said coldly. You have 72 hours. After that, I file the charges and you lose everything. Your job, your freedom, your daughter. Tick-tock, Mr. Morrison. Jake stumbled out of the office in a daze. 50,000 credits. It might as well have been 50 million. He thought about running, taking Lily and disappearing into the lower levels where station security rarely went. But they'd find him eventually. They always did. He made it back to the storage room on autopilot. Veth was there, and the moment the old alien saw Jake's face, he stood up. What happened? Veth asked. Jake told him everything. About Davidson, the charges, the impossible amount of money. I'm sorry, Jake said, his voice breaking. I shouldn't have helped you. I should have just called security that first night. Now Lily's going to pay for my stupid decision to be a good person. No, Veth said firmly. You will not apologize for having a good heart. This Davidson, he is corrupt, yes. Corrupt as they come. But he's got power, and I've got nothing. Veth looked at Jake for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You have more than you know. And it is time for this charade to end. Before Jake could ask what that meant, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. A voice came over the intercom, tense and formal. Attention all personnel. This station is now under diplomatic lockdown. All exits are sealed. Unknown vessels have entered the system. This is not a drill. Jake and Veth looked at each other. Through the corridor windows, Jake could see ships appearing, massive vessels that made the station look like a toy. They were beautiful and terrifying, covered in glowing symbols that pulsed like heartbeats. Veth, Jake said slowly, what's happening? The old alien stood straighter than Jake had ever seen him. His scales seemed to brighten, shifting from dull gray to brilliant blue and gold. His voice, when he spoke, carried an authority that made Jake's spine straighten automatically. My name is not Veth, the alien said. It is Vetheron. And I am the former emperor of the Valdrine. Jake stared. You're, what? 6 months ago, I was betrayed during a diplomatic mission. My ship was destroyed. I barely escaped, wounded and alone. When I reached this station, I could have revealed myself immediately. But I chose not to. I wanted to see how other species truly behave when they think no one of importance is watching. Jake's mind was reeling. You're royalty. You're actual royalty, and I fed you protein bars. I made you sleep in a storage room. You saved my life, Vetheron corrected gently. You sacrificed everything for a stranger. You proved that humanity, at its core, can be extraordinary. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Many footsteps. Jake turned to see Administrator Davidson running toward them, followed by security officers. But behind them came something else, figures in elaborate armor, moving with deadly grace. Davidson saw Vetheron and skidded to a stop, his face going pale. You can't be. I am, Vetheron said simply. The armored figures surrounded them. One stepped forward and removed her helmet, revealing a female Valdrine with scales that shimmered like gemstones. Her resemblance to Vetheron was unmistakable. Father, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Sarathel, Vetheron replied, warmth flooding his tone. My daughter. My Empress. The Empress of the Valdrine looked at her father, then at Jake, then back at her father. You've been here for 6 months. We've been searching everywhere. Why didn't you contact us? Because I needed to know, Vetheron said. This human, Jake Morrison, has shown me something I'd forgotten in my years of ruling. He showed me that true strength isn't about power or wealth. It's about choosing to help when it costs you everything and gains you nothing. The Empress turned to Jake, and he felt like he was being examined by something ancient and powerful. You fed my father. Yes, Your Majesty, Jake stammered. You gave him shelter? Yes. You sold a priceless artifact to save your daughter. I didn't know it was priceless. She needed medicine. The Empress smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Father, you were right about them. She turned to Davidson, who was trying to back away slowly. You threatened this human? You demanded money to make false charges disappear. Davidson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Your Majesty, I can explain. Silence. The single word carried absolute authority. You will be investigated. If what I've been told is true, you will face justice. Davidson was dragged away by Valdrine guards, protesting loudly. The Empress turned back to Jake. Jake Morrison, she said formally, on behalf of the Valdrine Empire, I offer our deepest gratitude. You saved the former Emperor. More importantly, you showed us the best of what humanity can be. Jake stood there in his janitor's uniform, mop still in hand, and couldn't think of a single thing to say. His brain had completely stopped working. Vetheran, Emperor Vetheran, put a hand on his shoulder. Breathe, my friend. This is a lot to process. You think? Jake managed to croak out. All around them, the station was descending into chaos. News of the Valdrine fleet's arrival was spreading. People were panicking, celebrating, or just standing around in shock. But in that storage room, Jake Morrison realized that his life had just changed forever. He just hoped it was a good kind of change. Though looking at the Empress's smile, and seeing the pride in Vetheran's eyes, he thought maybe, just maybe, everything might actually turn out okay. The next 72 hours were the strangest of Jake's life. Administrator Davidson was arrested within the first hour. Turned out, the Valdrine investigation team was very thorough. They found evidence of bribery, extortion, and worse, Davidson had been part of the group that originally tried to assassinate Vetheran 6 months ago. The plan was to kill the former emperor and blame it on human extremists, creating a war between their species. Davidson's job was to make sure Vetheran never left the station alive if he somehow survived the initial attack. Jake watched the news coverage from his apartment, Lily curled up beside him on the couch. She'd recovered from her infection, but now she had questions. Lots of questions. So the old alien you were helping was a king? She asked for the 5th time. Emperor, Jake corrected. But yeah, basically. And now his daughter wants to give us stuff. Jake sighed. The Empress had indeed offered rewards. Lots of them. Money, property, titles, a position in the royal court. They presented him with a holographic list that scrolled for what felt like hours. Enough wealth to never work again. Enough status to erase every hardship they'd ever faced. He'd turned most of it down. The Empress hadn't understood at first. You refuse our gratitude? She'd asked, genuinely confused. No, Your Majesty, Jake had explained carefully. I appreciate it, really. But I didn't help your father for a reward. I helped him because he needed help. Taking all that money, it would feel like I only did it for payment. Vetheran had smiled at that, like Jake had proven some point he'd been trying to make. But Jake wasn't completely stupid. He accepted one thing, a trust fund for Lily's education. Enough to make sure she could go to any school she wanted, study anything she dreamed of. That wasn't a reward, he told himself. That was just making sure his daughter had chances he never did. On the 3rd day, Vetheran came to visit. He arrived without guards or ceremony, just an old alien in simple clothes knocking on Jake's door like they were still just friends in a storage room. May I come in? Vetheran asked. Of course. You want some coffee? Fair warning, it's the cheap stuff. Vetheran smiled. The cheap stuff is fine. They sat at Jake's tiny kitchen table, the same one where Jake had eaten countless meals alone after his wife died. Lily was at school, finally healthy enough to return, so it was just the two of them. You know, Vetheran said, when I ruled the Valdrine Empire, I made thousands of decisions. Treaties, laws, judgments. I thought I understood leadership. I thought I understood what made someone truly strong. And now? Jake asked. Now I know I was wrong about many things. Vetheran stared into his coffee cup. I spent my life accumulating power, believing that power was how you protected those you loved. But you showed me something different. You had no power at all, yet you protected me. You sacrificed for a stranger. That's not weakness, Jake Morrison. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. Jake felt his throat tighten. I just did what anyone would do. No, Vetheran said firmly. That's where you're wrong. Most wouldn't. Most would have walked past me. Called security. Minded their own business. You didn't. Even when it cost you everything, even when it put your daughter at risk, you chose kindness. Do you know how rare that is? They sat in silence for a moment, just two people who'd been through something extraordinary together. My daughter wants to offer you something else, Vetheran said finally. A position. Not in the royal court, I know you'd hate that. But as a cultural ambassador. You and Lily would live on one of our colony worlds. Good schools, safe neighborhoods, real opportunities. Your job would be simple, just be yourself. Show our people what humanity can be at its best. Jake thought about it. Leaving the station, starting fresh somewhere new. Giving Lily the life she deserved. It was tempting. So tempting. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. After Vetheran left, Jake walked to Lily's school to pick her up. He stood outside the gates, watching kids of a dozen different species playing together. Lily ran up to him, her backpack bouncing, a huge smile on her face. Dad. Guess what? My teacher said I might get selected for the advanced science program. Jake hugged her tight. That's amazing, kiddo. She said it's because of my essay. I wrote about you. About how you helped someone even when it was hard. She said that's what real heroes do. Jake's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. I'm not a hero, Lily. I'm just a dad trying his best. That's what makes you a hero, she said simply, with all the certainty of a 7-year-old who knew her father was the best person in the universe. 2 weeks later, Jake accepted the position. They moved to a Valdrine colony world called the Sa, where the skies really were purple and the oceans really did glow at night. Lily enrolled in a school that made her old station classroom look like a closet. She thrived there, making friends with Valdrine children who thought humans were fascinating. Jake's job was exactly what Vetheran promised, just being himself. He gave talks at schools, not about heroism or grand gestures, but about small choices. About seeing someone who needs help and choosing to help them. About how you don't need power or wealth to make a difference. The Valdrine loved him. More importantly, they learned from him. Relations between their species and humanity improved dramatically. Trade increased. Cultural exchanges flourished. All because a janitor had shared his sandwich with a stranger. Years passed. Lily grew up smart and confident, studying xenobiology with the dream of becoming a doctor who could help any species. She never forgot the lesson her father taught her, that kindness was more valuable than credits, that compassion was more important than status. One evening, when Lily was 15, she found Jake sitting on their porch, watching the glowing ocean. What are you thinking about? She asked, sitting beside him. Your mom, he said honestly. Wondering if she'd be proud of how things turned out. Lily leaned against his shoulder. She'd be proud of who you've always been, Dad. Not because of the fancy house or the important job. Because you're good. Because when you saw someone suffering, you helped them. That's who you were before all this, and that's who you still are. Jake wrapped his arm around his daughter. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. Back on Valdrine Prime, in a palace of crystal and light, Vetheran sat with his daughter discussing matters of state. They'd just finished negotiating a complex trade agreement when the Empress pulled up a holographic display. Look, she said, showing him footage of Jake speaking at a university. He's still doing it. Still teaching them. Vetheran watched Jake, older now, grayer, but still with that same gentle expression, talking to a room full of students about the importance of simple kindness. You know, the Empress said thoughtfully, when I first saw him on those security feeds, I thought he was foolish. Risking everything for someone he didn't know. But he changed our entire empire. He changed how we see other species. He changed me. He changed me too, Vetheran admitted. I ruled for 100 years, Sarathel. I made laws that shaped billions of lives. But that human janitor taught me more about leadership in 3 weeks than I learned in a century of power. What did he teach you? Vetheran smiled. That true strength isn't about how much power you have. It's about what you do when you have none. It's about choosing kindness when it costs you everything. That's the lesson Jake Morrison taught me. That's the lesson he's still teaching. The Empress nodded slowly. We should give him another medal or something. No, Vetheran said gently. He wouldn't want it. The greatest gift we can give Jake Morrison is to live by his example. To remember that power without compassion is worthless. To remember that the smallest act of kindness can change the galaxy. And it had. One sandwich, shared in a maintenance tunnel by a man who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, had rippled across the stars. It sparked a friendship that bridged species. It exposed corruption and saved lives. It proved that humanity, at its best, was something extraordinary. Jake Morrison never sought fame or glory. He just wanted to be a good father, to teach his daughter right from wrong, to leave the world a little better than he found it. And in the end, that was exactly what he did. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never set out to be heroes at all. They're just ordinary people who see someone suffering and decide to help. No audience. No reward. Just the simple, profound choice to be kind when the world needs kindness most. That was Jake's legacy. Not the titles or the honors, but the reminder that anyone can change the world. You just have to care enough to try.